Hi, Management 3500 students. This is Steve Wagner, your instructor, and this is the first of a series of lectures on the readings from Chapter 7 on managing stress and emotions. So what is stress? Okay. Well, stress has been characterized as changes within people that force them to deviate from their normal functioning. So again, changes within people that force them to deviate from their normal functioning. So something that's presented to us that forces us to change. Now that seems like a fairly vague definition. However, stress is a complicated concept, and it's not necessarily all negative, as we will see. But when we talk about these changes that force us to deviate from our normal functioning, okay, this deviation from our normal functioning is manifested in these stress stages. Okay, so we first experience stress as alarm. We are alarmed that we need to deviate, we need to change. Something in our environment has said we need to do something differently. And as we will learn more and more, and probably we already know, that people are resistant to change and we are resistant to stress. Okay, and so we try to cope with stress through various means that we'll talk about. Okay, but if we remain in this stage of being alarmed and having to change or resist that change, if that happens over an extended period, that leads to exhaustion. We need some type of recovery from stress. And typically stress is short-lived, but when it is not, okay, that is when it drives us down. So an example that we hear a lot about is bullying. So bullying is an ongoing use of force or coercion or threat to abuse someone that is perceived to be vulnerable. And being the target of bullying is obviously a stressful situation. It's alarming. As it is repeated, there is resistance, and if it continues, there is exhaustion. Okay, so the pernicious nature of bullying it goes beyond just that it is being aggressive or demeaning someone, but it is that it is repeated time and time again. That is part of the essential nature of bullying. So when people experience this, again, can it be resisted? That is how we manage stress. We can manage stress through direct action. If possible, it's good to directly talk to your bully. Talk to them about what's happening. And oftentimes that's what's needed, okay? And to stand up and to say, I'm not a vulnerable person. Sometimes we need to do some cognitive reappraisal. We might need to change the way we think. Okay, so managing stress isn't just about action, it's about how we think about these stressful situations. And so a way of cognitively reappraising stress is to think, this isn't my problem, that's their problem. They're the person with the problem. Okay, and it can help to manage stress reaction symptoms. Okay, and here again, when bullying is pernicious, okay, it has many stress-related symptoms. People experience repeated negative emotions, and they dislike their jobs, and they're likely to get sick. I mean, it's not just even a psychological, but this kind of stress can lead to physiological symptoms also. So again, we need to take care of ourselves and react to eliminate that kind of problem. Okay. No, not all stress is necessarily negative. There are manageable levels of stress that we think of as functional stress. So for reasonable periods of times, we can be challenged. That will force us to change the status quo. That's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? And if it's at a manageable level, being challenged can generate positive emotions. It is really the essence of satisfaction, is overcoming and achieving when you're faced with some kind of challenge. It's exciting. It's enjoyable. But stress can also, of course, be dysfunctional. So if there is either too much or too little arousal continuing for too long, then we're likely to experience the negative side of stress. So what are these work conditions that lead to stress? We're interested in stress in the workplace. A lot of it can do to how we design work. Okay, we've talked a lot about ways of designing work to make it motivating. Okay, we also have to think about how we're designing work for others that might be inducing stress. Things like heavy workload, a lack of work breaks, having to work for long hours, hectic tasks that don't have a lot of meaning if a person's skills are not utilized, and especially if people don't have a sense of control. Now, if you look at that, you can see that a lot of that is not having the conditions that we thought of for having a motivating workforce. So if we do those things, we can mitigate many of these stressful task design situations. Now, managers, as we all know, can also be a source of stress. Okay, if managers don't allow participation, if there's poor communication, if managers are not helping people to deal with work life conflict, family friendly policies, those can all lead to stress. And this is the one thing about stress. We're focusing on stress in the workplace, but what we know is that stress spills over. The stress from our work life spills over into our home life. The stress from our home life spills over into our work life. Okay, so managers might think that, hey, it's not my job to make sure can have a happy family life. Okay, but if you're preventing someone from being able to manage their family life, okay, through odious management practices, then the stress that they experience is going to spill over into the workplace. There's those boundaries are not so easy to maintain. Other things, interpersonal relationships, so poor social environments, lack of support from coworkers and supervisors. The work roles that we have, stress often comes from the conflict that we have, okay? And when we're managing others, we might also have a friendly relationship between them, but we have to tell them what to do. We have to evaluate them. Okay, there can be conflict between those different roles. Sometimes there's uncertainty in our roles. And again, if there is uncertainty, there is a feeling of lack of control. Career concerns. So if people are insecure in their jobs, I hope none of you are feeling this right now, but I know a lot of people are with this situation that we're in currently. Lack of opportunity for growth, rapid changes in the workplace that we're unprepared for. And there may be environmental concerns. Okay, unpleasant, dangerous work conditions, including crowding, noise, air pollution, ergonomic problems. That means the physical setup of the workplace and whether it is congruent to your physical health, or is it causing you back pain and carpal tunnel syndrome, that pain in your wrist because a workplace isn't set up properly for repetitive motion. So as we said, there is distress, and that's typically what we think of when we think of stress, is this aversive circumstance, okay, this aversive feeling we have. But this feeling of distress, we typically, I think of it as high arousal, okay, where there are excessive demands on us. Okay, and yes, that is stressful. If we look at people who are in those situations, they tend to perform at a lower level. They tend to be less satisfied with their jobs. They tend to have less of a feeling of well-being. Okay, but too little arousal, okay, too few demands, boredom is also stressful. This is also dysfunctional stress, okay, that is also associated with lower performance, lower satisfaction, lower well-being. Where we see higher performance, higher satisfaction, higher well-being is in the middle, okay, that Goldilocks spot. So if we want to get to optimal performance, okay, we need levels of demand that engage people, that challenge people, but not to the point that they are excessive. This is a class on management. How do we change an organization to prevent stress? Okay. Well, we have to look at workloads and make sure that they match the capability and resources of the workers. Nothing is, I think, more stressful to me than if I have some challenge and I know I can meet that challenge, but I'm not provided the resources that I need to be successful in that task. Okay, so as managers, let's make sure our workers have the resources so that they can have control to meet those challenges. Again, we need to design jobs so they're meaningful, so they're stimulating, so that people have the opportunity to use their skills. And we need to clearly define people's roles and responsibilities. When there are clear expectations, then people can cope with the changes that come along. Those changes are part of a functional stress. But if people don't know what their role is and what their responsibilities are, then they either withdraw or they become overwhelmed, which is distress. We can give employees the opportunity to participate in decision making. Again, control. Giving people a sense of control is the greatest way to cope with stress. Okay? Improve communication, reduce uncertainty about employment prospects. If we give people opportunity for social interaction, this is a way for people to help each other with things like cognitive reappraisal, to think a different way. Through social interactions, we get support to help us to react to the changes we're confronted to. We can see how others are coping. We need to understand that there are other aspects to people's lives than just work. And if we can make work compatible with those other parts of their lives, then it's less likely that the stress that they get outside of the workplace is going to spill into the workplace. So as we said, there is a point of exhaustion in stress. That point where we have been experiencing the need to change and we have been reacting to this change, but the demands for change continue. If there is not some relief, some time for recovery, we can develop a syndrome that's called burnout. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Some of the signs and symptoms of burnout in the workplace. In terms of physical symptoms, we see things like weight loss or weight gain, sleeplessness, frequent illness, headaches. People sometimes cope behaviorally in dysfunctional ways. Okay, sometimes people cope by increasing risky behavior. Okay, sometimes they become irritable or moody. Sometimes there's an increased suspicion in others. And in terms of work performance, we definitely see burnout connected with decreased performance. We see it with people taking less initiative and having less interest in their work, and generally just being less efficient. Okay, taking more time to do the same amount of work.